Thank you all. I guess you are the few brave souls that have weathered all-day discussions on EVs and AVs. So I want to thank you personally for staying almost till the end of the day today. So I am CEO for a company called NIO. We are based in China and US and Germany in Munich. We started the company a little under 4 years ago. So we are less than 4 years old as a company. We started as a global startup in China, US, and Europe. We just took the company public a couple of months ago. And a few years ago, if somebody had said to me that I would personally be CEO for an electric car company, let alone that they would be startups in the auto industry, I would have laughed. I am new to the auto industry. I grew up in the tech industry prior to coming to NIO. I was Chief Technology and Strategy Officer for a company called Cisco. Prior to that, I was Chief Technology Officer for a company called Motorola. So my background was all in mobile and cloud. So today we are talking about smart mobility with an emphasis on the word smart. And clearly I come from industries that have enabled many devices to become smart. And that's the reason I joined this industry. So why are we at all talking about mobility? So what's the big deal? Why are there so many startups? What's all the excitement about in the mobility space? Why is this important? I think let's start there. I think to me, mobility really for human beings means freedom. There was a gentleman here that asked a question, what happens when mobility becomes a prescribed solution? Would human beings feel like we've lost our freedom? And I think that's fundamentally why we all care about mobility. And for generations, the movement of people and the transportation of goods have helped for us to become a connected world. And according to McKinsey, by 2030, roughly 60% of the world's population will live in metropolitan areas. And as we all know, we've talked a lot about traffic. Many of us love mobility and love cars, but we hate sitting in traffic, where we are moving at 20 kilometers per hour or less than that. So essentially, electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles help us solve this problem. At NIO, we say we want to give people their time back. And that's really why we are working on this, right? So it's not, the technology is cool, and all day long today we've talked about how technology helps us get there, but until we apply the technology to really solve real problems, we won't be successful. So I think that's the reason that I started in this industry. So there's a big debate out in the industry, will people ever buy cars or not? Will our cars become obsolete someday? But regardless of whether it's ride share or on demand, people still have to be making these vehicles, and we're in the business of making this a reality. So we're a real business making and selling cars, and we believe that all of us, from the time we are little children, love cars. In fact, for many people around the world, the first thing they buy with a paycheck is a car. In the US, people spend 30% of their income today in buying cars. In countries like China and India, that's almost 100 to 180%. So people spend a substantial amount of their money aspiring to own a vehicle someday. So I think that will remain. Probably there'll be less number of vehicles in a household. As somebody pointed out, in the US today, roughly there's about 2.5 vehicles per household. That number will definitely come down as we become more efficient in providing solutions. So our challenge as an industry is to make these products to what they need to become, not what they have been, right? So that's, I think, how we think about cars. So the car of the future is really no longer just a car. The car of the future is a robot. Essentially, it's a collection of sensors, cameras, radars, lidars, ultrasonic cameras, all of these integrated onto amazing compute platforms that my friends at NVIDIA and Mobileye and companies like this are all building. But essentially, I tell my team at NIO, we're not building a car, we're building a robot that looks like a car. There's a subtle but significant difference, right? If you think about it, there's a lot of hardware innovation, that has to go into making that a reality. What should the ingress egress, how do you enter this robot and exit this robot need to look like? That's a mechanical engineering challenge. And so it's actually, as the car transforms to the car of the future, it's creating a renaissance in the hardware industry revolution. And the car is a service. I think we all know that we today use a mobile app to get a ride on demand when we want it, where we want it, and it tells us how long it's going to take to get there, whether it's Uber or Ola or whatever the app is and whatever the company is that's providing the service, and someday that'll be a robot, right? That's the robot taxi. The car is really a battery on wheels that can be charged in minutes. We develop our platform with a swappable battery architecture. NIO's cars have an architecture where the battery can be swapped out in 5 minutes or less. And the reason we did this is not necessarily just because the technology enables us to do it, but in China, homes are smaller than in the United States or rest of the world. So people don't have big garages to install charging ports in their homes. So they have to rely on public infrastructure. And of course, you don't want to wait at a public charging station for 8 hours or 6 hours to have your car charged to half a capacity. So we developed a robotic system that swaps out the battery in 5 minutes, and we provide that as a service. So if you think about that, the car is really a battery on wheels. And more, the car is a data center, right? Today, it has 3 supercomputers in a car that are all virtual and distributed. There's probably a server sitting inside the car and in the cloud. So the car really becomes a data center on wheels. And so when it drives itself, it'll be safer than us driving because computers don't get tired, they don't get drunk. So it's going to be much safer. Of course, we have to get the technology to be as safe as or better than a human experience. And the car will actually be a living companion. A living room. Within NIO, we develop a AI agent in the car that understands who is in the car, what are your preferences. We call that Nomi. Today, Nomi talks to our passengers in Mandarin, because that's our customer. And someday, it'll talk to you in any language. And the difference between an AI inside a car and an Alexa or Cortana or Siri is that this actually controls functions inside the car. So you can tell Nomi, open the sunroof, adjust the temperature, play my favorite song. It does all that, unlike the AI in your smartphone. So that is the big difference. And so the car of the future will be different, but they will be cars in the future, whether we call them cars or robot. That's really up to us. So the industry is evolving, and I think it is not that the auto industry will not innovate or won't innovate or cannot innovate. I think, but the nature of what we are working on has to change. So if you think about the car industry, a little over 120-year-old industry, you can kind of think of the innovation in 3 phases. Phase 1 of the automotive industry, the innovation was primarily in mechanical and hydraulic systems. The second phase was all about electrical and electronics. And the third phase is really going to be about digital systems, or it's actually what we call software-defined hardware. So it's not just software, it's not hardware, it's really how do you combine the two together. And that's a big challenge because actually it demands skill sets to be very different. And so I think that's the opportunity for the entrepreneurs in the room to be really thinking about the full stack of development that these vehicles of the future will require from all of us. So, some of what I'm saying might sound like science fiction, right? If you think about the car becoming the next big screen, it becomes not just a mobility. I mean, today we're all talking about mobility, but think of the opportunities for commerce, content, and productivity. So the next set of startups, I think if I were to fast forward and say 5 years from now, if I come to this conference, will we call this smart mobility or different kind of applications because of that mobility? So those are the startups that we need to be working on today. And that's not far-fetched, by the way. I used to work in the smartphone industry, which used to be called the cell phone. And primary application was a voice device when I was at Motorola. It was primarily phone calls. And today, if you look at anybody's device, nobody's holding the device like this. Everyone's doing this. Right? So it's become the new screen, and the screen has evolved, and the content, commerce, and productivity evolved from television to PC to smartphone to the next screen will be in our autonomous vehicles. So the skill sets from entrepreneurs that are needed for this to happen will be not just AI, not just robotics, but understanding data. We talked about data platform, data science, but how do you monetize that data without violating people's privacy? This is going to become a big opportunity. Security is going to play a big role in this. Of course, electrification and shared economy. So this is the next big growth we will see in many different industries. So why at all work with cars if we all love cars so much? So what's the problem? I think Morgan Stanley or somebody said cars today actually the most dangerous, most underutilized mechanical device there is on the planet. And this is probably true, right? The first big problem is a loss of productivity. Why do we all hate commutes so much? Because when you're sitting in a car, you're literally a prisoner. Today you can't work, and if you're distracted or trying to work, you'll probably be in an accident, so you better not do that. You better focus on driving. So how do we give people time back? This is a global problem. Roughly around the world, 130 billion minutes of productivity are lost because of commute times. In the United States, 4 million Americans commute roughly 45 minutes each way, and there are hypercommuters that commute 90 minutes each way. So that's roughly 3 to 4 hours of people's time that is lost. So how do we give people that time back? What will be the next set of startups that will focus on this? Once we get autonomy, then the next wave of innovation will coming from enabling people to be productive or peaceful or actually be entertained in their vehicle. The second big issue is pollution. This is a picture of Tel Aviv. And I read somewhere that the environment minister in Israel actually said that 2017 data, there were 2,200 people in this country that died because of air quality related issues. About half of those issues are caused by vehicular pollution. And that's apparently more than the number of lives lost in car accidents. And this is, again, a global phenomenon, right? These are pictures from around the world, whether it's Milan or London or Norway, LA, Shanghai, Mumbai. When we think about most polluted cities, I think the opening speaker today said 14 out of the 15 most polluted cities are in India. China is no better. Shanghai or Beijing, if you go, you literally have to check the air quality and wear a mask. But LA is equally bad. So I think this is another issue that we know electric vehicles solve this problem. And China is actually mandated. So as a company, we are deciding to focus in China first because the largest vehicle market today and the largest electric vehicle market in the world. And I think that is expected to grow. So I think as you're developing technologies, it's really important to think about the industrialization of those technologies. How do you actually apply that technology to not just a few fleet cars or test vehicles, but millions and millions of vehicles around the world? So that's, I think, another call to action for the entrepreneurs in the room to be thinking about that. And it's all, it's going to continue to grow and around the world, hopefully, and Israel probably increase its adoption rate as well. I firmly believe someday we will not see internal combustion engines anymore. It will be all electric vehicles, not just because it's good for the environment, but it's actually good to maintain. It's very low maintenance. I have an electric vehicle that I haven't had anything to do with in terms of service or maintenance for the last 5 to 6 years. A third issue is accidents. And so the reason that we are actually excited about autonomy because we make cars that we sell to consumers is to keep our customers or our users safe. This is a picture of my Tesla. I had a Tesla and somebody rear-ended me. And it was at a stoplight because clearly that person behind me was distracted and they were on their phone and I was stopped and they hit me from the back. So if you had a vehicle with cameras and sensors in the back, firstly, that person would have been alerted saying, hey, there's a car stopped in front of you, and I would have known that as well. So we know that autonomous vehicles are the answers to all these problems. However, to build this and make this a reality, we really have to think about the full stack. And if you look at the stack, literally there's opportunities to starting companies in each layer of the stack, all the way from the powertrain to the UI. Nobody here today talked about the user interface. How will the UI change inside the car? Do we need an instrument cluster that's actually displaying information that perhaps is redundant when you have an electric vehicle, an autonomous vehicle? How does that need to change? So these are things that we are working on along the full stack and making these cars a reality. So as I said, NEO, we're a global company. We decided to start the company as a global company, not to just take advantage of the market, but to leverage the talent everywhere. We work with partners from around the world. Mobileye Amnon is a close partner for us. We use the technology that's developed from many different companies around the world so that we can be faster to the market as we focus on things that no one else is doing that we can put our resources in. So I know I'm out of time right now, and I went through some of that very quickly, but I want to end with saying, as we think about electric vehicles, as we think about autonomous vehicles, it's also important to think about what comes next. What will be some applications that we can develop? What will be some streaming capabilities that we can develop? How can we actually move data faster from the car into the cloud? Security, these are opportunities for all of us as entrepreneurs to change the world. Thank you.